Hello and welcome everyone to Craftcast, the Freemasons podcast. I'm here today with Shaun and James, as always. How are we today, guys?
I am well. At the time of recording this, I was at a lodge meeting. I was kind enough to be invited by Harrington Lodge in Derbyshire to give a presentation on communicating Freemasonry, which was fantastic. It was lovely to be up there in Long Eaton, which is in Derbyshire, I believe. But I was actually staying just across the border in Nottinghamshire, so I am travel weary, but well overall, unlike Brother Dalton, who we hope is not contagious.
I may have a slight cold that I'm recovering from, but I'm okay. It's good to be with you. Hopefully I don't sound too bizarre on the microphone.
Are you on the Lemsip?
I am on the day nurse, day and night nurse, the strong stuff.
He looked at me very ominously there. He said, I've got a cold, and looked straight at me.
It's coming to you.
Yeah.
And I have deliberately chosen to sit next to you, Stephen.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm honoured. Yeah.
And how are you, Stephen?
Probably somewhere in between both of you.
How's life as a student? You know this is a thing now. Because you're a student, me and James are desperate to hark back to our memories as undergraduates.
So are we going to have an episode of Diaries of a Student?
Yeah.
I think so. Diaries of a Student. Of course, when Shaun and I were students, everything was in black and white, clearly.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah.
It's our absolute pleasure today to be joined by the most worshipful brother, Jonathan Spence, Programme Master. Sir, it's good to have you with us.
It's very nice to be here. Very kind of you to invite me. And please, just call me Jonathan, don't you, sir?
Oh, fantastic. Well, Jonathan, that's fantastic. Thank you very much. Let's start at the beginning, if we may. What was it that attracted you to Freemasonry in the first place?
I was asked whether I'd like to become a Mason at a rugby club dinner when I was 20 by the deputy headmaster of my school. And there were members in the family, and my great-grandfather had been a Mason in Scotland. And so I went home and chatted to my grandfather, and he sort of said, well, go and research it. Well, in those days we didn't have the web. I had to go down to the City Library in Rochester, so I did a little bit of research. Fortunately, I didn't read the wrong books. And I just said, well, yes, I'd be very interested, but when I was 21, and when I turned 21, I got a birthday card from the deputy headmaster of the school together with a joining form. And I just thought it was quite intriguing.
In those days, were you allowed to join at 18 with a dispensation, or?
I think so, but the school lodges typically didn't have it in those days. They waited till 21, so it was only the university, particularly Oxford, the Apollo University Lodge in Oxford and Isaac Newton in Cambridge, where the dispensation was typically given. Right. I'm not aware of it being a normal form of things 40 years ago, because this was in 1982. And I think things have happily moved on since then.
Yes. And obviously, I guess back in those days, you couldn't have possibly imagined that now, 40 years on, you'd be a ruler in the craft. How does someone become a ruler? Presumably, a letter doesn't just drop through the letterbox and you've got a lovely bit of headed paper inviting you to become a ruler. Or maybe it does, Jonathan. Maybe you'll tell me otherwise.
Funnily enough, I was asked this question during the Sky documentary.
Oh, right, okay.
And my answer is the same. If I knew that, I may not actually be sitting here. I think it's one of those processes. It's like, how does anyone become a provincial officer or a grand officer? You're asked to do various things. You do it to the best of your ability. And then others decide, well, let's use the person for somebody else. And I've been very lucky in the sense of, in my particular case, I was master of my school lodge at the age of 28. I then became a provincial Grand Steward in East Kent. Then I was provincial junior Grand Warden, Grand Steward. I obviously could walk in step and carry a wand, because then the then Grand Director of Ceremonies, Peter Lowndes, asked me whether I'd be a deputy GDC. And it sort of went from there. So I had lots of ceremonial work. In those days, when I was deputy GDC, we looked after London. So my first 3 months I remember extremely well, because I was out and I'd only just got married. So at the age of 38 to my Spanish wife. And suddenly I was on duty. I did 6 or 7 London centenaries, a bicentenary in Lancashire, about 4 provincial installations and a couple of charity festivals all in the first 3 months. And for whatever reason, obviously people felt that I was doing a reasonably good job, so it sort of went from there. But quite how you make the jump from GDC to Deputy Grand Master, that was a bit, and there's a story in that the Deputy Grand Master today is responsible for looking after the charities, overseeing the charities from the Grand Lodge perspective. And at the time we had 4 charities, and the then Programme Master, Lord Northampton, said they needed my corporate finance and other skills in order to create the MCF. So there was a particular task that was asked of me in addition to all the other things the Deputy Grand Master has to do. So I suspect that was that's the real answer. I happen to have the right skills to do a particular job at the right time.
And over the last 40 years, what would you say has been the most memorable moment you've had in Freemasonry?
Gosh, I've had quite a few memorable. I mean, it's quite difficult to distill it down to one particular event. I mean, the ones that I would draw out would be the tercentenary at the Albert Hall, as GDC proclaiming the Grand Master for the very first time in the full Grand Temple. That was pretty nerve-wracking.
I was going to say, yeah.
The creation of London, we did a big ceremony at the Albert Hall, which I did as GDC only 6 months into being GDC, so it was a bit of a baptism of fire.
You don't want to mess that one up.
No, you don't want to mess that one up. But also the really vast numbers of Masons I've met in individual little things. I always enjoy going, if I go on a duty, going down to the bar and just chatting to the members of a lodge and just learning about them. And so it's a very varied answer. So I think it's quite difficult to say there is one particular thing that you would say is the most memorable.
Could I pick you up on when you was proclaiming the Grand Master? How long does it take you to learn that piece of work? To actually learn it, as in from start to finish, and then polish it up, the actual learning took 3 days. Wow.
Building it up.
Yes.
It's something like 28 or 29 lines, or it certainly was when I was doing it. And then you just keep on polishing it. But nothing quite prepares you for when you're doing it. And it's always, actually, in my particular case, I became the Grand Master for the first time with the Grand Master being there.
Right.
Because we were installing the new Deputy Grand Master, which was not really part of the plan. Part of the plan was to practice in March, do it in April with the Grand Master present. So it was particularly challenging to sort of try and get that right. But nothing quite prepares you for the fact that a full temple, you wouldn't believe the number of people that fiddle with their gloves in the balconies, which actually can be quite distracting. Yeah, fortunately, Gavin Purser, who was GDC before Peter, warned me about this and said, whatever you do, if you look at them, you'll be put off. There is a plain bit of wall between the balconies with a sort of escutcheon on it. Just stare at that. And just cut everything else out. And then you look at them when you're actually doing the last bit, calling on them to salute.
Wow.
And that was very, very good advice because it was pretty nerve-wracking.
Yes, I can imagine.
And how do you, I mean, I think everyone has their own take on how they learn their ritual. How do you go about learning your ritual when you first need to learn a piece or brush up on a piece that I'm sure you've done pretty much all of it, so to brush up on it at least.
You'd be surprised. I'm still doing new things. I actually did the address to the brethren for the first time this year.
All right.
Was that at DKW Lodge?
That was the second time I did it. City of London Lodge of Installed Masters for the very first time.
Wow.
It's just one of those things. I've done the Wardens a number of times and the Master a huge amount of time. So always in sections. So build it up in sections. And then as you just repeat, it's rather like when I was having to learn anything for my degree, I'd write it out 2 or 3 times so that it really goes in and stays in. And of course the other thing is I happen to be a member of a number of lodges, all of which have slightly different ritual. And I've seen more ceremonies in one particular lodge than I have any of the others, just because of the nature of the lodge. And I find myself not actually able to learn strictly per the book, because there are phrases that come in from other rituals with which I happen to be familiar. So I have a sort of slightly hybrid. I would never attempt to do a silver matchbox or anything like that.
Oh, really?
Because of this, there are phrases that come in different ceremonies, which I have a mixture of the working of my mother lodge, emulation, and Apollo University Lodge,
right.
And it's not necessarily very clear which version I'm actually going to do at any one time.
So it's always a surprise for the brethren on the occasion. Which version?
Or a surprise to me, actually.
Jonathan, we've talked about some of the highlights over the last 40 years. I guess for us, probably the biggest highlight we can think of for you would be the recent appointment to Program Master. How did it feel for you to be walking into the Grand Temple in front of all of those Freemasons from across the world and to be invested in that role?
It was absolutely nerve-wracking before I went in, standing outside, knowing that Grand Lodge had been opened, etc. And one of the more amusing things when I look back on it, didn't seem amusing at the time, was I'd quite forgotten how long the escort was. So I positioned myself about 3 meters past the screens as you come out. And as the doors opened and I saw them coming, there was a real moment of panic, and I suddenly thought, I'm not standing far enough back. They'll never be able to manoeuvre. And I kept on walking back until I actually hit the screen on the other side. But once we got going, it was fine. But I'm walking into a full Grand Temple and knowing that there were brethren in the other rooms, so extra rooms, the sheer numbers that turned out, it was very, well, both moving and inspiring. The fact that the membership were willing to come in such numbers to witness something which is never likely to happen again, with 3 rulers being installed at once. I mean, we've gone back and checked. We cannot find anything in the records that say we've done 3 at the same time before. So, it got easier as it went on. Once I'd actually taken the obligation, then it got a bit easier.
Yes.
Well, I mean, it must be quite nice to know. Obviously, everyone turned up for that, but the trust that sort of everyone is wanting you to do well. Everyone there knowing that they trust that you're going to do an exceptional job over the next, 7-year plan, for example, that you have. It must be quite nerve-wracking, but equally quite, sort of encouraging that everyone's there and looking forward to seeing what you've got in store for us, I guess.
Actually, that's a good point to ask you, Jonathan, about the upcoming 7-year strategy for UGLE and Supreme Grand Chapter. Obviously, a lot of work's going into it already. Without giving away too much, no spoilers in this podcast, if we can, what are your hopes for Freemasonry in the next 7 years or so?
In essence, that we maintain and strengthen ourselves as a thriving organisation, and that all of our members really enjoy their Masonry. And because they enjoy it, that they engage with it, and therefore they get so much more out of it. And the organisation as a whole is strengthened by that. And if we can look back and say we have made that progress from a reasonable position, don't get me wrong, I mean, we're not in any way in trouble, but we need to be doing things in order to strengthen ourselves so that we have a good long-term future. And remembering, I think, that we need to also adapt as society adapts. I mean, one of the things I feel very strongly about is I'm still working. I'm only just 62, and I'm still working. I do a variety of all sorts of different things, different roles, as well as this. And it is very important we have a lot of our members in the ages from their 20s right through to their 60s who are still working. We also have members who are no longer working. They've retired and enjoying their retirements and enjoying their Masonry. And we need to remember that we have to be sensitive to achieving the right balance so that it's enjoyment for all at all the age ranges and all the different circumstances in life. And we have to remember that I very strongly believe that there are priorities for individuals. The first is your family. The second is your work, if you're working. And third is other things, which includes Masonry. And it's not to belittle the importance of Masonry, but it is to make sure that we get that balance in life right. Because if we have a balance in life, then we're so much happier as individuals. And there are times when we're out of balance and we're less happy. But if we've got those things as our fundamental principles,
yes,
then actually we've got a much better chance of thriving and enjoying.
I think if you can get that balance right as well, it probably enables you to enjoy your Freemasonry even more than if you're just only doing that and it's all consuming. If you can have that balance, it's probably quite. As a student, I can certainly say that I look forward to trying to find that balance when I go to work.
Oh, good luck with that. You're having enough trouble finding your balance as a student.
Staying on his feet is the balance issue, yeah.
So when you're not in your regalia, what does your sort of behind the scenes day look like as a program master? Is it all Freemasonry, or like you say, well, it isn't all Freemasonry? What else do you get up to?
Well, no, it clearly isn't all Freemasonry. There are days like today when it is entirely Freemasonry. I'm in meetings.
Sorry about that.
Well, it's all right. Not a problem. And which is great. And there are days when I do other things and a bit of Freemasonry. I mean, so the behind the scenes when I'm not at one of my lodges or doing on ceremonial duty is most days, and I try not to do it at the weekends, but in the run-up to the December QC when we will be launching the strategy for Freemasonry 2022 and beyond to the membership. Calls almost every day on some or other aspect of Freemasonry. Zoom meetings, thank God for Zoom, is all I can say. It's one of the terrible time of the pandemic. One of the things that's happened, which we should continue to use, are the technological assistance to be effective and not have to always get on a train to go somewhere to have a meeting.
Yes.
So we use that quite a lot. So I would say every day of the week I have part of a day where I am doing something involving Freemasonry. Maybe a call with the Grand Secretary or the President of the Board, or members of the Strategy Working Group, or even, dare I say it, the comms team.
We know we're in trouble when that happens.
But, so there's an aspect. But, I happen to have all sorts of things that I do. So I work at Queen's College. I'm a non-exec director of bank. I'm a non-exec director of metals trading company. I hold a commission in the Army Reserves. There are all sorts of things that do a bit of rugby occasionally, go and watch the odd rugby match, referee the odd rugby match, do some hobbies, garden, feed my fish,
Well, I was going to ask what other hobbies you have outside of that. Sounds like a lot of work. So what you do in your downtime?
Oh, well, downtime. Well, I try and referee some rugby. It's about the fourth time I've done it, which I do enjoy. Keeps me fit, keeps my weight down, which is quite helpful. I paint 28mm metal soldiers, which I started to do when I was 9 years old, when I was sent off to prep school. And my father bought me 6 French Imperial Guard, 6 Highlanders, and 6 Scots Greys from the Waterloo period. My son also does it, so I do that. Very keen on railways, so in the process of building a model railway in a rather large part of the house, much to my wife's dismay as to how big the model railway is going to be. And, lots of reading. I enjoy classical music, going to watch my favourite rugby team when I can, going to Twickenham when I can. Walking. I enjoy a lot of walking. So getting out and about, and a bit of travel when we can. Now Fred is at university. My wife is very keen we do a bit of travelling as and when we can. So not just to family weddings.
Fantastic.
Now, Jonathan, you talked earlier about the need to be more inclusive for people that are still working. And around the table here, we've got, Shaun, Stephen and myself, 3 young Freemasons. What more do you think the craft needs to do to appeal to people of our age, sort of mid-20s, early 30s?
That's a really good question, but it's not just what do we need to appeal to your age group. Because actually the thing we have to remember is that Freemasonry is an intergenerational thing.
Yes.
But we need to determine what are the best things. So we've done quite a lot of work. In fact, Shaun will know this on why Freemasonry, why become a Mason. But we're extending that to why remain a Mason. because that's really quite important. And we've got to use yourselves and others like you as the ambassadors. Well, what is it about Masonry? And we've got to listen. And what is it about Masonry that you have found attractive? What are the particular points that make it appealing? And do the same with people in their 40s, their 50s.
What's going to keep you here for the next 20, for example? What's going to keep you here for the next 20?
Exactly. Exactly. And what is it about it? Because we all know that there are multiple reasons and different reasons why people join Masonry. There's no one single reason.
Well, on the topic of other things that we can do to be inclusive and involving everyone in the world of Freemasonry, I've got a vested interest as being from Gibraltar and being from a district myself. But what do you feel is the importance of our districts, and even more so, what do you think maybe we can do to involve districts more in sort of mainland Freemasonry and in what goes on here at UGLE?
As you know, Stephen, I'm a big fan of the districts because English Freemasonry is unique. It's quite different to Scots or Irish Freemasonry and Continental Freemasonry, for the simple reason that we explicitly say that the Royal Arch is an integral part of this Grand Lodge. We are the only Grand Lodge that does it. And the districts are every bit as contributing to the uniqueness of English Freemasonry, but in different parts of the world. And there are local customs as well, which are incorporated. And I've been lucky, I've visited over the years, not all, but many of our districts. Now, one of the issues is because of distance. How do we make them feel as important within, and how do they contribute in a way where they feel that they are contributing? So I'm not telling any tales out of school here when I say that I have done a lot of presentations to provincial and district Grand Masters and Grand Superintendents, and it was deliberately done to include all of the districts as well as all of the provinces in the metropolitan area, so that what we're launching in December is a strategy for the whole of the English Constitution. Now, clearly, different things will be needed in different districts. And so I would like to see district representation on some of our central bodies. Now, whether we can achieve that in a way, but with Zoom, who knows? And fun enough, it's the sort of thing that district Grand Masters and Grand Superintendents are saying they'd also like to be involved. So, we'll see where we go, but it's something I'm keen to explore.
Fascinating.
Well, as a Gibraltarian, that's lovely to hear, so thank you.
Well, Jonathan, as you may be aware, when we knew you were going to be joining us, we put out a call to members in First Rising and social media to ask them to send through their questions to the Programme Master. And I think it's safe to say, isn't it, gents? We were inundated.
Wide response.
They did not let us down.
They did not let us down.
But we've chosen 4. The first question comes from Somerset Freemasons from their Twitter page. And they ask you, if you could change anything about the craft, which I suppose you can, what would you change and why?
You're asking the right person.
Actually, believe it or not, the Programme Master can't change. All
Right.
the Programme Master and the rulers and the provincial rulers can do is to set out a stall and persuade the members. Change has to come from the members. So that's the first thing.
Yeah.
And what I would say is that we do become more willing to innovate, because there's a tendency not to be willing for a reason, we're like a lot of organisations. And when it works, really celebrate the fact it works, but be brave enough to say, well, that didn't quite work the way we hoped. So I would say a sort of becoming an organisation where we're willing to learn, to try something and learn. And we've made a lot of progress on that, but I'd like to see that developed. So that would be my, if I could influence a change across Freemasonry, that would be the one that I would like to influence.
So our next question from the membership is from Michael Norton from Portcullis Lodge, number 2038. And he asks, did you get a new apron when you became Programme Master, or did you inherit the past Programme Master's apron?
The answer to both those parts is yes. I did get a new apron for when I'm not coming to Freemasons Hall, so if I go to a lodge and it happens to be full dress regalia. But otherwise, so a new full dress apron for at home, but otherwise I inherited my undress aprons and the one that I will wear when I'm on duty from the Grand Lodge. We seem to have a supply of Pro Grandmaster's aprons. I think we've got enough for both the Grandmaster and the Pro and the past Pros all to turn up all in aprons. So basically, I inherited a past Pro's apron from a past Pro, but I'm not sure which one.
So you've got a whole load of them that have been passed down the generations. Basically, they could be 200 years old.
The one I'm wearing is when I'm on duty is very old. Wow. In fact, so old the belt actually went in the middle of the installation.
Oh no, did it?
Yeah. So luckily it didn't go completely. It was only about a quarter of an inch still in place. Fortunately, disaster was averted.
That would have been awkward.
John Vasquez would have had to appear with a safety pin. And quickly,
Okay, the next question from Marcus Nanini. What's the impact of technology and social media to the fraternity, do you think? And I assume that means sort of what impact you see it having as much as what it has had already.
I think that it's had... I mean, social media is a double-edged sword because it can be both positive and negative, but I would say that it's given us the opportunity to communicate what we're really about effectively to an audience that we might not necessarily... I mean, I'm talking about non-Masonic audience, and therefore we're able also to deal with the Enough is Enough campaign was exemplified this on the front foot, and we've got to maintain ourselves on the front foot, and actually to be able to communicate with different generations. But I know full well that my son of 19 uses a different set of social media to... Well, probably not used him, but to James, James and Shaun, and James and Shaun uses a different set of social media to the generation above. And actually, if we're smart, and I think we are smart vis-a-vis comms, we have the ability to communicate much more effectively with a much broader audience and more consistently.
I would say that actually as a comms officer of a district, I found that something that I really wasn't expecting, a really nice part of social media is that when we sort of post things, it's actually getting what we do as a district out to the rest of them, the rest of the fraternity. And I actually had someone from my Mother Lodge put on my Mother Lodge group chat saying, someone from South Sudan told me the other day that you enjoyed a trip to Spain enjoyed a lodge meeting there. We saw it, we thought it looked great. And it's that was exactly, something really unexpected, but sort of the beauty, one of those positive sides of social media, I guess.
Right, final question. This one is from Liam East, from Cali Lodge number 7525 in the great province of Wiltshire. Going through the chair next year, if you could give me one piece of advice, what would it be?
Relax and enjoy it.
Yeah.
And there's everybody there to help you. It only comes once. Well, it might not come once. You might go through multiple chairs, but for the first time, relax and enjoy it.
Perfect. There you go, Liam. You've heard it from the Programme Master himself. Right, Jonathan, we now have to finish up a few quick-fire questions. Mr. Dalton.
Favourite drink?
Indian Pale Ale.
Favourite holiday destination?
Any of the mountains of Spain.
Favourite sports team?
Harlequins.
Oh dear.
Well, I had to give you a laugh somewhere.
Tea or coffee?
Tea.
Rather topical for a podcast. Favourite word? No pressure.
Serendipitous.
Oh, fantastic.
What a good word.
Last but not least, childhood hero.
Nelson.
That's a good one. Good way to end. Jonathan, thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate it. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I'm sure our listeners will very much have enjoyed this episode too. We'd love to have you back at some point, maybe in December with the strategy. Who knows what might happen? I'm sure we've
putting you on the spot. We are filling your calendar now.
yes, absolutely. But thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate it.
It's great to be here. Thank you very much.
Wow. Gentlemen, I think we can all agree that was absolutely fascinating, wasn't it? Really enjoyable. It was obviously a great pleasure to welcome the Programme Master into the recording studio here at Freemasons Hall today. And listen, all of you lovely listeners, you can, of course, catch up with the podcast on all major softwares. That's your Spotify, that's your Amazon Music, that's all of the above, plus many, many more. Do drop us a tweet, the UJLE Twitter page, @UJLE_Grand Lodge. Drop us a comment on Facebook. at United Grand Lodge of England, or on Instagram on the same handle. And of course, email us in the old-fashioned way, a good old email, podcasts@ujelly.org.uk. Let us know if there's a particular topic that you want to hear about, and we will do our utmost to get that recorded for you. We cannot wait to see you next time, and goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.